If you're watching this video right now, you're already ahead of 90% of people because while everyone else is scrolling through their phones pretending the world is perfectly stable, you're here doing the real work, building real security. And today, I'm going to walk you through the 11 foods that should form the absolute foundation of your long-term food storage. These aren't random items I pulled out of thin air. These are the foods I've personally tested and stored since I started prepping back in 2012. The foods that will actually keep you and your family fed when everything else fails. I'm Zach, and I've been at this preparedness thing for over a decade now. Back when I started, I had no idea what I was doing. I wasted money on gear that didn't matter, I stored food the wrong way and watched it go bad. My wife thought I was losing it, but through trial and error and a lot of research into real-world collapse situations from Venezuela to Yugoslavia, I figured out what actually works for ordinary people with limited space and tight budgets. And that's exactly what I'm sharing with you today. Now, before we dive in, let me be clear about what we're talking about here. TEOTWAKI, the end of the world as we know it. I'm not talking about a 3-day power outage. I'm talking about the kind of event that disrupts everything for months or even years. Supply chains collapse, grocery stores empty out and stay empty, the grid goes down and stays down. Running water becomes a memory, and you're left with whatever you prepared ahead of time. Could it happen? History says yes. It's happened in dozens of countries over the last century, and the warning signs we're seeing today suggest our turn might be coming sooner than we'd like to think. But here's the good news. If you store the right foods, you won't just survive. You'll maintain your strength, your health, and your sanity while everyone else is falling apart. The criteria I use for these 11 foods is simple but strict. First, they need to last 25 to 30 years in storage. I'm not interested in foods you have to rotate every few years. These are insurance policy foods. Put them away and forget about them until you need them. Second, they have to be calorie-dense and nutrient-rich. In a long-term crisis, calories equal survival. Third, they should require minimal preparation. You might not have power. You might not have fuel. These foods need to work anyway. And fourth, they should be difficult or impossible to produce on your own. Because if you can grow it or raise it, great. But these 11 items are things you probably can't make yourself. All right, let's get into it.
Number 1 is wheat. And I'm not talking about flour. I'm talking about whole wheat berries, hard red wheat, hard white wheat, spelt, kamut, even einkorn if you can find it. When you store wheat in its whole kernel form and keep it sealed away from oxygen and moisture, it will last 30 years or more. I've personally tested wheat that was stored in less than ideal conditions for over 20 years, and it was still perfectly good. Here's why wheat is so critical. It's one of the most calorie-dense foods you can store. 300 to 400 pounds of wheat per person gives you a full year's supply of carbohydrates. And wheat is incredibly versatile. Yes, you'd prefer to have a grain mill to turn it into flour for bread, but even without a mill, you can sprout wheat berries to massively increase their nutritional value. Or you can just boil them and eat them as wheat berries. They're chewy and nutty and honestly pretty satisfying. One thing I learned the hard way: if you or someone in your family has gluten sensitivity, look into einkorn wheat. It's an ancient grain that's much lower in gluten than modern wheat, and a lot of people who can't handle regular wheat do just fine with einkorn. It costs more, but it's worth it to have food your whole family can actually eat. Number 2 is white rice. Not brown rice, white rice. This is non-negotiable. Brown rice has oils in the bran layer that go rancid after about 6 months, even in ideal storage. White rice, on the other hand, will last 30 years or more when stored properly. I've seen rice from the 1960s that was still edible. It had yellowed a bit and there were a few insect skeletons in there, but it was fundamentally sound. If that rice had been stored in a sealed can with an oxygen absorber, it would have been perfect. White rice is your ultimate fallback food. It's cheap, it's calorie-dense, almost nobody is allergic to it, and it's easy to prepare. You can cook it with just water and heat, or if you're really in a bind, you can even soak it overnight and eat it raw the next day. I wouldn't recommend that as your first choice, but it works. Store at least 25 to 50 pounds per person, more if you can. Rice combines perfectly with beans to give you a complete protein, which brings us to number 3. dried beans and legumes, pinto beans, black beans, kidney beans, lentils, chickpeas. When stored in airtight containers with oxygen absorbers, dried beans will last 25 to 30 years. They're packed with protein, fiber, vitamins, and minerals. They're filling, and they're cheap enough that anyone can afford to stock up. Now here's something most people don't know. Old beans take longer to cook. If you've got beans that have been sitting in storage for 10 or 15 years, they might need to soak overnight and then cook for 2 or 3 hours to get soft. But they're still nutritious. They're still edible. They just need more time and water. I store a variety of beans because each type brings its own flavor and its own set of nutrients. Pinto beans for refried beans and chili. Black beans for soups and rice dishes. Lentils because they cook faster than other beans and don't require soaking. And chickpeas because they're incredibly versatile. You can make hummus, roast them for a crunchy snack, or just toss them in a salad. Aim for 50 to 75 pounds of dried beans per person for a year's supply. That might sound like a lot, but beans are dense. It doesn't take up as much space as you'd think.
Number 4 is oats, specifically oat groats or steel-cut oats. Rolled oats will work too, but they don't last quite as long. Oat groats are the whole oat kernel, and when stored properly, they last 25 years or more. Oats are one of the healthiest grains you can eat. They're full of soluble fiber, which is great for your heart and your digestion. They're filling, they're versatile, and they're easy to prepare. Here's a trick I use all the time. Take rolled oats, put them in a jar with some water, and let them sit overnight. In the morning, you've got overnight oats. No heat required, no cooking fuel needed. Just add a little honey or some dried fruit, and you've got a solid breakfast. If things get really bad and you don't have any way to cook, oats are one of the few grains you can eat this way. Store at least 25 pounds of oats per person. They're light, they don't take up much room, and they'll give you a reliable breakfast option when everything else is uncertain. Number 5 is corn. Now, I know what you're thinking. Corn isn't as nutrient dense as wheat or oats, and you're right, but corn has something the other grains don't. Corn contains certain amino acids and nutrients that complement wheat and beans. When you eat corn alongside those other staples, your body can actually use the protein more effectively. Plus, corn is versatile. You can grind it into a cornmeal for cornbread or tortillas. You can boil whole corn kernels and eat them like hominy. You can even pop it if you've got a heat source. My kids love popcorn, and knowing I've got 50 pounds of popcorn corn in storage gives me a way to bring a little normalcy and comfort into a crisis situation. Corn will last 25 to 30 years in proper storage. It's cheap, and it adds variety to your diet, which matters more than you might think when you're eating the same staples month after month. Number 6 is dehydrated or freeze-dried vegetables. Specifically, I focus on onions, celery, and carrots. These 3 vegetables form the base of almost every soup, stew, and chili you'll ever make. The French called this combination mirepoix, and once you start using it, you'll understand why it's been the foundation of cooking for centuries. Dehydrated onions and celery will last 25 years or more in sealed containers. They're lightweight, they rehydrate quickly, and they bring flavor and nutrition to otherwise bland meals. Dehydrated carrots are loaded with vitamin A, which is critical for vision and immune function. And in a long-term crisis where fresh vegetables are hard to come by, these dehydrated options will keep you from developing deficiencies.
Now, there's a difference between dehydrated and freeze-dried vegetables. Freeze-dried vegetables are lighter and rehydrate faster, but they take up more space. 1 can of dehydrated celery is equal to 2 or 3 cans of freeze-dried celery. I prefer dehydrated for long-term storage because of the space savings, but either option will work. Store at least 10 to 15 pounds of mixed dehydrated vegetables per person. It doesn't sound like much, but remember, these are concentrated. A little goes a long way. Number 7 is salt. Pure salt. And I mean pure. No iodine, no anti-caking agents, just salt. Pink Himalayan salt, sea salt, kosher salt. These pure forms of salt will last forever. Literally forever. Salt doesn't go bad. But here's the catch. Salt with additives, like iodized table salt, only lasts about 5 years because those additives break down over time. So if you're storing for the long term, stick with pure salt. Why is salt so important? First, your body needs it. You lose sodium through sweat, and if you don't replace it, you'll develop serious health problems. Second, salt is essential for food preservation. You can cure meat with salt. You can extend the shelf life of butter and cheese with salt. You can make sauerkraut and pickles with salt. In a long-term crisis, salt gives you the ability to preserve the food you grow or hunt so it doesn't go to waste. And third, salt is a valuable barter item. Throughout human history, salt has been used as currency. There's a reason the word salary comes from the Latin word for salt. In a collapse scenario, salt will be worth its weight in gold, or more accurately, worth its weight in food. Store at least 10 pounds of salt per person. If you've got the space, store more. You won't regret it. Number 8 is white sugar. Now, I can already hear some of you saying sugar isn't a survival food. And you're right that it doesn't have any vitamins or minerals. But sugar provides calories, and calories are survival. Plus, sugar is critical for food preservation. You need sugar to make jams and jellies. You need it to preserve fruit. And you need it for baking, which becomes a huge morale booster when you're 6 months into a crisis and everything feels hopeless. I've tested sugar that was stored in Mylar bags for over 15 years. It had clumped up a bit, but once I broke up the clumps, it dissolved just fine and tasted perfectly normal. Sugar stored in airtight containers will last indefinitely. Store at least 70 pounds per person. I know that sounds like a lot, but when you're making jam, canning fruit, and baking bread from scratch, 70 pounds disappears faster than you'd think. And sugar is cheap. There's no reason not to stock up. Number 9 is honey. And this one is special because honey doesn't just provide calories and sweetness. Honey has legitimate medicinal properties. It's antibacterial, it's antimicrobial. You can use it to treat wounds and burns. You can use it to soothe sore throats and coughs. And nutritionally, honey contains trace minerals and enzymes that white sugar doesn't have. I've personally opened jars of honey that were stored for 40 years. The honey had crystallized and darkened, but it was still perfectly good. You can re-liquefy crystallized honey by gently warming it. And even if you don't, crystallized honey is still edible and still has all its beneficial properties. Here's the key with honey. Don't store it in metal containers. I learned this the hard way. Metal reacts with honey over time, and you'll end up with black flecks of metal contamination in your honey, which makes it inedible. Store honey in glass jars or food-grade plastic buckets, and it will last forever. I recommend storing at least 12 quarts of honey per person. If you're not storing any other sweeteners, double that amount. Number 10 is fats and oils. And this is where a lot of preppers make a huge mistake. Most oils go rancid within a year or two. Olive oil, vegetable oil, canola oil, they all have a limited shelf life. The one exception is coconut oil. High-quality coconut oil stored in a cool, dark place will last 2 to 3 years. Some sources say even longer. But for true long-term storage, you need to think beyond bottled oils. The best option for long-term fat storage is freeze-dried butter powder or ghee powder. These products have the fat content you need for cooking and baking, and when stored properly, they last 25 years or more. Fats are essential. Your body can't absorb certain vitamins without fat. Your brain needs fat to function, and psychologically, food without fat just doesn't satisfy you the same way. Another option is storing shortening in sealed cans. Crisco and similar products will last several years unopened, and they work for baking and frying. But my preference is butter powder because it tastes better and has more nutritional value. Store at least 20 pounds of fat per person per year. Whether that's coconut oil, butter powder, or shortening, make sure you have it. It's one of the most commonly overlooked items in food storage, and it's one of the most important. Number 11 is powdered milk. Specifically non-fat powdered milk. This is your backup dairy supply, and it's more important than most people realize.
Milk provides calcium, protein, vitamin D, and vitamin A. Those are critical nutrients that are hard to get from grains and beans alone. Now let's be honest, powdered milk doesn't taste as good as fresh milk. Now, I'm not going to lie to you, but when you mix it into recipes, use it in baking, or add it to oatmeal and coffee, it works just fine. And in a long-term crisis, you're not going to be worried about whether your milk tastes like it came from a farm. You're going to be grateful you have it. Non-fat powdered milk stored in sealed containers with oxygen absorbers will last 25 years or more. Whole milk powder only lasts 3 to 5 years because of the fat content, so stick with non-fat for long-term storage. 1 can of powdered milk makes about 3.5 gallons of reconstituted milk. That's a huge amount of nutrition in a very small package. Store at least 25 pounds of powdered milk per person. If you've got young kids, store more. Now, here's where things get interesting, because I know a lot of you watching this are feeling a bit overwhelmed right now. You're looking at this list and thinking, that's a lot of food, that's a lot of money, that's a lot of space. How am I supposed to make this happen?
And I get it. I've been there. Back in 2014, I was living in a small apartment with almost no storage space and a budget that was stretched thin every month. I couldn't afford to go out and buy 300 pounds of wheat all at once. So I didn't. I built my food storage slowly. $50 here, $75 there. Every paycheck, I pick up a 25-pound bag of rice or a few more cans of dehydrated vegetables. And you know what? It added up faster than I expected. Within 6 months, I had a solid 3-month supply. Within a year, I had 6 months. And now, over a decade later, I've got more than a year's worth of food for my whole family. But I also know that starting out is the hardest part, which is why I put together a free resource specifically to help you with this. It's called the $50 Food Supply, and it walks you through exactly how to turn $50 into a 90-day food supply for your family. I'm not talking about some theoretical plan that only works on paper. This is a real, tested plan with specific brands and specific prices. It includes a shopping list, storage strategies, and emergency meal ideas that require zero cooking fuel. It even includes 37 essential preparedness items most people never think to stockpile. And number 23 on that list will absolutely surprise you. The reason I created this guide is because I remember how overwhelming everything felt when I started. I remember staring at prepper websites that wanted me to spend thousands of dollars on freeze-dried meals I couldn't afford. And I knew there had to be a better way, a way that worked for ordinary people with ordinary budgets. So I tested it. I figured out the most cost-effective foods, I calculated exactly how much you need, and I laid it all out in a simple, step-by-step format that anyone can follow. The guide is completely free, no catch, no credit card required. Just click the link in the description below or check the pinned comment, and I'll send it straight to your inbox. You can have it in your hands in the next 5 minutes and start building your food security today. All right, let's keep going, because I want to talk about something most preppers completely miss: storage. You can buy all the right foods, but if you store them wrong, they'll be worthless when you need them. The enemies of long-term food storage are oxygen, moisture, light, heat, and pests. You have to protect your food from all 5. Here's how I do it. For grains like wheat, rice, and corn, I use Mylar bags with oxygen absorbers inside 5-gallon food-grade buckets. The Mylar bag blocks light and moisture. The oxygen absorber removes the oxygen that would otherwise cause the food to degrade. And the bucket protects everything from pests and physical damage. This setup will keep your grains good for 30 years or more. I label each bucket with the contents and the date I sealed it, and then I stack them in my basement where it stays cool and dark year-round. For beans, I use the same method: Mylar bags with oxygen absorbers inside buckets. Some people skip the Mylar and just put beans straight into buckets, but I don't recommend it. The Mylar adds an extra layer of protection, and it's cheap insurance. For sugar and salt, I keep them in their original packaging inside sealed 5-gallon buckets. This protects them from moisture, which is the main threat. Sugar and salt don't need oxygen absorbers because they don't degrade from oxygen exposure. They just need to stay dry. For dehydrated vegetables, powdered milk, and butter powder, I buy them already sealed in number 10 cans from reputable suppliers. Those cans are specifically designed for long-term storage, and they work beautifully. Once you open a can,
Transfer the contents to a glass jar or a smaller sealed container and use it within a few months. And here's a critical tip. Store everything in a cool, dark place. Heat is one of the biggest killers of food storage. If your storage area regularly gets above 80 degrees, your food's shelf life drops dramatically. I'm talking from 30 years down to 3 or 4 years. So find the coolest spot in your house. A basement is ideal. A closet on an interior wall works. Even under a bed is better than a hot garage or attic. Now let's talk about rotation. One of the biggest mistakes people make is treating their long-term food storage like a museum. They seal it up and never touch it. And then 10 years later, they realize they have no idea how to use it. Don't do that. Every few months, pull out some of your stored food and actually cook with it. Make a pot of beans. Bake some bread from your wheat. Cook up some rice. This does two things. First, it ensures your food is still good. If something went wrong with your storage, you'll find out before it's too late. And second, it teaches you how to use these foods. Because trust me, if you've never cooked with wheat berries or powdered milk, you don't want your first attempt to be in the middle of a crisis when you're already stressed and exhausted. I try to cook at least one meal a month using only food from my long-term storage. It keeps me practiced. It keeps my family familiar with these foods. And honestly, it's kind of fun. It's like a challenge. How good of a meal can I make with just rice, beans, dehydrated vegetables, and some spices? Speaking of spices, that's something I didn't include in my main list, but it's worth mentioning. Spices don't have a 30-year shelf life. Most spices start losing their potency after 2 or 3 years, but they're still important because eating plain rice and beans every day will break your spirit faster than almost anything else. Stock up on salt, pepper, garlic powder, onion powder, cumin, chili powder, oregano, basil, and cinnamon. These basic spices will make your food actually taste good, which matters more than you might think. Store your spices in airtight containers in a cool, dark place and plan to rotate them every couple of years. This is one area where you can't just set it and forget it, but it's worth the effort. Another thing worth mentioning is water. I didn't include it in my list because this video is specifically about food, but obviously you can't survive without water. And more importantly, you can't prepare most of these foods without water. Rice needs water, beans need water, even wheat berries need water to sprout or cook.
So whatever food storage plan you build, make sure you have a reliable water plan to go with it. That means stored water, water filtration systems, and ideally a renewable water source like a well or a nearby stream. But that's a whole other video. Let me address something I hear all the time. People say, Zach, if things really get that bad, if we're talking about a true TEOTWAKI scenario, won't people just come and take my food? And the answer is, maybe. If you tell everyone you know about your preps, then yeah, you're making yourself a target. That's why I recommend keeping your mouth shut. Don't brag about what you have. Don't post pictures of your food storage on social media. Just quietly build your supplies and keep it to yourself. But beyond that, think about it this way. If a crisis happens, most people are going to be completely unprepared. They'll have 3 days of food in their house if they're lucky, and they're going to panic. They're going to rush to the grocery stores and fight over the last loaf of bread. They're going to waste time and energy and put themselves in danger. You, on the other hand, are going to be calm. You're going to be secure. You're going to stay home with your family and wait for the chaos to settle. And when things stabilize, when people start figuring out how to move forward, you're going to be in a position of strength. Not because you're hoarding, not because you're selfish, but because you took responsibility for your own family's survival ahead of time. That's not paranoia, that's wisdom. And honestly, it's one of the most loving things you can do for the people you care about. All right, let me tie this all together. These 11 foods, wheat, white rice, dried beans, oats, corn, dehydrated vegetables, salt, sugar, honey, fats and oils, and powdered milk are the foundation of a real long-term food supply. They're not glamorous, they're not exciting, but they work. They're affordable, they're storable, and they'll keep you alive and healthy when everything else falls apart. You don't have to buy everything today. You don't have to spend thousands of dollars. Just start. Pick 1 or 2 items from this list and add them to your storage this week.
Next week, add a couple more. Build it slowly and steadily, and before you know it, you'll have a food supply that gives you real peace of mind.
And if you haven't grabbed that free $50 food supply guide yet, now's the time. Seriously, it's free, it's practical, and it's designed specifically to help you get started without breaking the bank. The link is in the description below and in the pinned comment. Just click it, enter your email, and I'll send it right over. No spam, no sales pitch, just a solid resource to help you build your food security. Before I go, I want to leave you with one last thought. Preparedness isn't about fear. It's not about being paranoid or living in a bunker. It's about taking responsibility for your own survival and your own family's well-being. It's about refusing to be a victim when things go wrong. And it's about building the kind of quiet confidence that comes from knowing you're ready for whatever happens. The world is unstable. That's not fear-mongering. That's just reality. Supply chains are fragile. The economy is unpredictable. Natural disasters are getting worse, and the systems we've relied on for our entire lives could fail at any moment. But you don't have to be afraid of that, because you're doing the work. You're building your security, one bag of rice at a time, and that makes you different. That makes you prepared. So if you found this video helpful, do me a favor. Hit that like button, drop a comment below, and let me know which of these 11 foods you're going to start with. And subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, because I put out a new video every week covering everything from food storage to water purification to security and beyond. This is a community of people who are taking responsibility for their own future, and I'm honored to be part of it. And one more time, if you haven't grabbed that free $50 food supply guide, the link is right below this video. Click it, get the guide, start building your food security today. You'll be glad you did. Stay calm, stay prepared, and I'll see you in the next one.